Imagine a scene that defies every expectation. The Son of God, facing the highest earthly authority, the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. This is not a moment of passionate defense or a powerful declaration, but one of profound, unsettling silence. Jesus, who had once commanded legions of angels and calmed the raging sea with a word, stood accused, yet offered no argument in his own defense. This profound stillness, so contrary to what one might expect from someone on trial for their life, holds a mystery that echoes through history. Why did the creator of the universe choose this specific moment to say so little? Was it a sign of weakness or something far more powerful? Many have wrestled with this question, searching for answers in the historical records and theological interpretations. The silence was not an act of passivity or defeat. It was a deliberate, active choice, an act of spiritual power that spoke volumes without uttering a single sound. It was a strategic fulfillment of ancient prophecies, a moment carefully orchestrated in the divine plan. To truly grasp the significance of this silence, we must look beyond the immediate courtroom drama and delve into the deeper, unseen forces at play. This is a story that goes beyond mere human understanding, revealing layers of divine wisdom. What transpired between Jesus and Pilate was not just a legal proceeding, but a pivotal point in the unfolding narrative of redemption. The silence of Jesus was not an empty void. It was charged with meaning, a silent roar that defied earthly logic and heralded a cosmic victory. It challenges us to reconsider what true power looks like and how God often works in ways that confound the wise of this world. As we unpack this remarkable event, we will uncover how Jesus' silence before Pilate was a deliberate act, deeply rooted in prophetic scriptures. We will explore how an ancient prophecy, seemingly unrelated to a Roman trial, became the very key to understanding this profound moment. The connection between Jesus' quiet steadfastness and the words spoken by a prophet centuries before is truly astonishing, revealing the intricate tapestry of God's plan. The air in the Roman Praetorium was thick with tension, a palpable unease clinging to every stone. Pontius Pilate, a man accustomed to the clamor of trials and the impassioned pleas of the accused, faced an enigma. Before him stood Jesus, the man accused of sedition, blasphemy, and defying Caesar. Pilate had heard the shouts of the crowd, the fervent accusations from the religious leaders, and he expected a vigorous defense. Yet from Jesus there was nothing. A profound silence enveloped him. Pilate questioned him, probing for answers, for a denial, for any word that would justify his intervention or allow him to dismiss the case. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked. The answer was nuanced, a statement about truth, but not a direct confrontation. Then came the barrage of accusations from the chief priests and elders, condemning Jesus on multiple counts. Pilate turned to him again, urging him to respond. "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" Still, silence. This was not the silence of fear, nor was it the silence of someone overwhelmed. It was a composed, deliberate, and deeply unsettling quiet. It unnerved Pilate, a hardened Roman governor, more than any passionate defense or desperate plea ever could. The absence of words in such a critical moment seemed to possess an unearthly weight, challenging Pilate's perception of power and justice. The scene crackled with unspoken meaning, as if the very heavens were holding their breath, watching this silent standoff. The political implications of this silence were immense. Pilate knew the volatile nature of Jerusalem, the simmering unrest among the Jewish people. A public spectacle, an executed king, could ignite a rebellion. Jesus' silence left Pilate without the easy out he sought, forcing him to confront a dilemma that extended beyond mere legal precedent. It was a spiritual weight too, as Pilate sensed something otherworldly about this silent prisoner, a truth he could not grasp with his earthly authority. This remarkable stillness spoke more loudly than any words could. It was a testament to a different kind of authority, one that transcended the Roman court and its laws. It was a silence that declared sovereignty, a silence that disarmed accusers, and a silence that left the mighty Pilate utterly bewildered. This quiet defiance hinted at a power that originated not from earthly might, but from a divine realm. The contrast is stark, almost unimaginable. We remember Jesus standing on a boat amidst a furious tempest, his disciples cowering in fear. With a mere word, "Peace, be still," he commanded the raging wind and waves, and they instantly obeyed, leaving behind an eerie calm. We recall him speaking to a man possessed by a legion of demons, and with a single authoritative utterance, casting them out, restoring sanity and peace. We picture him teaching vast crowds, his voice resonating with wisdom and truth, delivering parables and declarations that captivated thousands. This was the Jesus who spoke with unparalleled authority, whose words brought healing, deliverance, and life. He spoke to the blind, and they saw. He spoke to the lame, and they walked. He spoke to the dead, and they rose. His ministry was characterized by powerful declarations, profound teachings, and authoritative commands that demonstrated his divine nature. Yet, standing before Pilate, the very same voice, the one that had held sway over creation and human hearts, chose to be silent. This deliberate refusal to speak was not a lapse. It was a profound act of will. It was not a sudden weakness, but a controlled, purposeful choice, deeply woven into the fabric of prophetic fulfillment. The silence itself became a powerful message, communicating far more than a defensive argument ever could. It was a testament to his divine self-control, a demonstration of his unwavering commitment to a higher purpose. His silence was a deliberate, calculated move on a cosmic chessboard. It was not a moment of helplessness, but one of immense power, channeled through submission. This quietude was a prophetic echo, fulfilling ancient whispers about the Messiah's path. It emphasized that his mission was not to win an earthly debate or to escape a human trial, but to accomplish a divine salvific work. The lack of words revealed the depth of his resolve and the unwavering focus on his ultimate mission. The profound silence of Jesus before Pilate finds its deepest resonance in the ancient words of the prophet Isaiah. Centuries before Jesus stood accused, Isaiah foretold the coming of a suffering servant, a figure who would embody humility and sacrifice. In Isaiah 53 verse 7, the prophecy declares, "He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth." This is the precise image that came to life in the Roman Praetorium. Jesus' conscious embodiment of this prophecy was not coincidental. It was central to his identity and mission as the Messiah. The imagery of the lamb and the sheep is potent, signifying innocence, vulnerability, and a complete lack of resistance in the face of suffering. A lamb led to slaughter does not cry out. A sheep before its shearers does not struggle or complain. Their silence is absolute, a poignant symbol of their unresisting submission. In choosing to remain silent, Jesus was actively fulfilling this ancient vision. He was not merely a victim. He was a willing participant in a divine drama foretold long ago. His quietness was a living testament to the Scripture's truth, demonstrating that every detail of his life, including his trial, was part of God's preordained plan for redemption. This was not a passive silence born of fear, but an active, obedient silence born of divine purpose. The theological depth of Isaiah's prophecy, brought to life through Jesus' silence, reveals the essential nature of his mission. He came not as a conquering king to defend himself with armies or arguments, but as a sacrificial lamb to bear the sins of the world. His unresisting silence underscored his role as the ultimate sacrifice, the one who would lay down his life freely for humanity. This act of quiet submission was his greatest act of power, securing salvation in a way that earthly might never could. His refusal to speak was his profound yes to the Father's will, a silent affirmation of his role as the suffering servant. It showed that his kingship was not of this world, and his victory would not be achieved through worldly means. This deliberate quietude was a powerful declaration of trust in God's sovereignty, even in the face of ultimate injustice and condemnation. The lamb before the shearer silently offered himself, securing a future of hope and reconciliation for all. Pontius Pilate, the formidable Roman governor, found himself deeply perplexed by the silent figure before him. He was accustomed to loud protests, fervent pleas, and desperate attempts at self-preservation from those accused. Yet Jesus offered none of these. This unsettling quietude left Pilate baffled, even fearful. He could not comprehend a man who seemed so powerful, yet refused to defend himself when his life hung in the balance. What Pilate saw as a lack of defense, heaven understood as a divine declaration. Pilate's bewilderment stemmed from his limited, earthly perspective. He viewed the situation through the lens of Roman law and political expediency, unable to grasp the cosmic significance of the moment. He expected a worldly king who would fight for his throne, or a common criminal who would plead for mercy. Instead, he encountered a silence that transcended human understanding, a quiet strength that defied all his expectations and legal protocols. His fear grew, hinting at a recognition, perhaps subconscious, that he was dealing with something far beyond an ordinary man. God's plan, however, unfolded with perfect clarity. While Pilate wrestled with earthly dilemmas and political pressures, the divine strategy was being meticulously executed. Jesus' silence was not an empty space, but a powerful utterance in the language of heaven, declaring his willing obedience to the Father's will. This quiet surrender was an integral part of God's grand design for human redemption, a step towards the ultimate triumph over sin and death. The contrast between earthly power and divine wisdom could not have been more striking. Pilate, with all his authority and legions, stood powerless before a silent prisoner. His inability to comprehend Jesus' motives, or the profound meaning behind his quietude, highlights the limitations of human wisdom when confronted with God's sovereign plan. This moment serves as a timeless reminder that God's ways are often contrary to human expectation, and his deepest messages are sometimes conveyed in the most unexpected ways. In our own noisy world, filled with clamor and demands for explanations, God's silence can often be profoundly unsettling. Yet, just as Jesus' silence spoke volumes to the heavens, so too can God's apparent quietude in our lives be a powerful means of communication, calling us to trust, to listen, and to see beyond our immediate circumstances. Pilate's confusion ultimately led to an act that, unbeknownst to him, paved the way for God's greatest display of love and power. Jesus' silence before Pilate was not an act of submission to Roman authority or to the whims of the governor. On the contrary, it was a profound act of submission to the will of his heavenly Father. In that tense courtroom, Jesus was not merely a prisoner. He was fulfilling a divine mandate, willingly embracing the path that had been set before him from the foundation of the world. His quietude was a testament to his unwavering obedience, a silent yes to the Father's plan for redemption. He could have summoned legions of angels, as he himself later stated, to free him from his captors. He could have spoken words of defense that would have swayed Pilate or incited the crowd to his favor. Yet he chose silence, a deliberate choice born of perfect trust in God. This was a radical form of submission, a surrender of his own right to defend himself for a higher eternal purpose. It demonstrated a love for humanity so immense that it eclipsed his own suffering. The strength required to remain silent in the face of such injustice is almost incomprehensible to us. When every fiber of human nature cries out for vindication, for defense, for an explanation, Jesus chose the path of quiet endurance. This was not weakness. It was a demonstration of divine fortitude, a strength derived from his perfect alignment with the Father's will. His silence was an act of radical trust, knowing that his Father would ultimately vindicate him. He was the sacrificial lamb, and his silence underscored this role. A lamb does not argue its case or resist its fate. It quietly fulfills its purpose. Jesus, in his profound humility, embraced this role, walking willingly towards the cross. His quietude before Pilate was the first crucial step in his ultimate sacrifice, a prefigurement of the silent offering he would make on Calvary. This was not a surrender to worldly power, but a triumph over it. By refusing to engage in Pilate games, Jesus unveiled the true nature of his kingdom, one that operates not by earthly might or human rhetoric, but by divine will and sacrificial love. His silence was a declaration that his authority came from above, not from the fleeting power of Rome. It was a silent, powerful affirmation of his true kingship, a kingdom not dependent on earthly defense. His quiet presence challenged Pilate's very understanding of power and authority. The governor, accustomed to the loud and the boisterous, was confronted by a stillness that spoke of an authority he could not control or comprehend. This profound submission to his Father was Jesus' greatest act of defiance against the systems of this world, making his silence far more powerful than any spoken word. Consider for a moment the profound paradox of that scene. Jesus possessed every ability to speak words that could have saved himself. A single declaration of his innocence, a powerful display of his divine authority, even a compelling argument that highlighted the injustice of the trial, could have swayed Pilate. Had he chosen to defend himself with words, he might have walked free from that Roman court, escaping the cross entirely. But had Jesus saved himself, humanity would have remained lost. The very purpose of his coming was to offer himself as the perfect sacrifice, to bridge the chasm between a holy God and a sinful humanity. His salvation depended not on his ability to defend himself, but on his willingness to give himself. The path to our freedom necessitated his condemnation, and his silence was a crucial part of that sacrificial journey. This confronting truth brings us face to face with the immense cost of our redemption. The quietness that sealed his earthly fate was the very silence that purchased our eternal liberty. His deliberate choice not to speak, not to argue, not to fight for his own life, was an act of immeasurable love, securing our salvation at an unfathomable personal cost. It was a profound exchange, his life for ours, his condemnation for our justification. He willingly accepted the accusations and the judgment, bearing the weight of humanity's sin in silence. Every unspoken word was a step closer to the cross, every moment of quiet endurance a deeper act of grace towards us. The power of his sacrifice is amplified by his silent acceptance of injustice, highlighting the depth of his commitment to his mission. This challenges us to grasp the true meaning of grace in a deeply personal way. It was not earned, but freely given, secured by his unwavering obedience and his silent sacrifice. The words he did not speak for himself were spoken for us, in the form of his ultimate act of love on Calvary. The silence of Jesus before Pilate resonates deeply with two other pivotal moments in sacred history: the silence of Adam after the fall, and Jesus' anguished yet submissive prayer in Gethsemane. In Eden, when confronted by God after disobeying, Adam offered excuses and blamed another, failing to take responsibility. There was a profound silence in his spirit, a lack of true repentance. Jesus' silence, however, was a reversal of Adam's passivity and a profound demonstration of his active obedience. Unlike Adam, Jesus did not offer excuses or deflect blame. His quietude was not a sign of guilt, but of sovereign acceptance of his mission. He was silently taking responsibility for the sin of humanity, stepping into the breach where Adam had failed. His silence was an act of active righteousness, where Adam's was a manifestation of his fall. This silence also echoes the whispers of Gethsemane, a garden of agony and decision. There, Jesus wrestled with the Father's will, praying, "Not my will, but yours be done." That agonizing prayer, though spoken aloud, contained an undertone of profound submission, a silent assent to the path of suffering. His silence before Pilate was a continuation of that yes to the Father, a public demonstration of the commitment made in the quiet of the garden. The physical silence in Pilate court was a spiritual echo of the profound internal surrender that had already taken place in Gethsemane. It showed his unwavering resolution, his full embrace of the cup of suffering. The Gethsemane moment was the silent preparation, and the Pilate moment was the silent execution of that preparation. Both were steeped in humble, obedient silence. This silent obedience was redemption echoing across history. From the Garden of Eden, where humanity fell through disobedience and blame, to the Garden of Gethsemane, where redemption was secured through agonizing submission, and finally to the Praetorium, where redemption was publicly displayed through quiet, unresisting sacrifice. Jesus' silence was a thread weaving through time, connecting the beginning of humanity's plight with the promise of its restoration. Before Jesus uttered the 7 profound statements from the cross, before the nails pierced his flesh and the thorns crowned his head, there was a profound silence. The Passion narrative, often associated with cries of anguish and the sounds of suffering, actually begins not with blood, but with deliberate restraint. His quietude before Pilate was the overture to the symphony of salvation, the foundational note upon which the entire sacrifice would be built. This silence was not empty. It was pregnant with meaning, speaking of love and sacrifice long before a single blow was struck. It was a silent declaration of his willingness to endure, a quiet acceptance of the pain to come. Every unspoken word was a step deeper into his redemptive purpose, a silent offering of himself for humanity's freedom. The profound stillness was itself a powerful statement of his divine resolve. His refusal to speak was a quiet act of surrender that disarmed his accusers and revealed the true nature of the battle being waged. It was not a battle of words, but a battle for souls, and Jesus was fighting it with love and humility rather than rhetoric. The silence was his weapon, his defense, and his victory all at once. This quiet submission was already speaking of triumph, even before the cross. It spoke of a love that was steadfast, a grace that was boundless, and a power that transcended all earthly understanding. The silence was the groundwork, the unspoken foundation upon which the entire edifice of salvation would be built. It was a premonition of the ultimate victory that would follow his apparent defeat. The restraint shown in Pilate court foreshadowed the ultimate self-control on the cross, where he remained silent even in the face of excruciating pain and mocking. His quiet strength was consistent from beginning to end, a testament to his divine nature and his singular focus on accomplishing the Father's will. Jesus' silence before Pilate profoundly revealed the nature of his kingdom. It is a kingdom unlike any earthly empire, for it is not defended by eloquent arguments, military might, or the exercise of worldly power. Instead, it is established through surrender, built upon sacrificial love, and governed by the unwavering will of God. This quiet steadfastness stood in stark contrast to the loud, aggressive kingdoms of this world, which rely on rhetoric, coercion, and violence to maintain their dominion. Earthly kingdoms rise and fall through conquest and political maneuvering, their leaders engaging in debates, issuing decrees, and asserting their authority through force. Jesus, the King of an eternal kingdom, chose a different path. His silence was his statement, demonstrating that his reign was spiritual, not temporal, and his power was moral, not physical. He refused to defend himself because his kingdom did not depend on human defense or worldly validation. His silence was a declaration that his kingdom operates on principles entirely alien to earthly systems. It is a kingdom where humility reigns, where suffering leads to glory, and where surrender is the ultimate act of power. This challenged Pilate, who understood power only in terms of legions and laws, to confront a reality that transcended his limited worldview. Jesus did not need to speak. His very presence, in its quiet dignity, articulated the true essence of his reign. The kingdom of heaven came not with a trumpet blast of defiance, but with the quiet surrender of its king. It was established not through triumphant speeches, but through suffering endured in silence. This paradoxical approach is the hallmark of God's wisdom, turning earthly expectations on their head. The cross, seemingly a symbol of defeat, became the throne from which he would forever reign. And his silence before it was the initial, profound step towards that eternal dominion. This fundamental difference between earthly and heavenly kingdoms challenges our own understanding of power and influence. We often seek to defend our beliefs, our positions, and our rights with words and arguments. But Jesus demonstrated that true victory, the kind that lasts eternally, sometimes requires quiet endurance, trust in divine purpose, and a willingness to yield. His kingdom is not built on human strength or cunning, but on the foundation of God's unwavering love and perfect plan. The silence spoke of a different kind of victory, one that would dismantle the powers of darkness, not through confrontation, but through submission, not through a loud defense, but through a quiet sacrifice. It was a revelation that his rule was spiritual, transforming hearts and minds, rather than conquering territories. His quiet reign begins in the human heart, established through grace and truth, rather than by human decree. Jesus' silence before Pilate was a strategic undoing of Satan's greatest weapon, accusation. From the Garden of Eden, where the serpent first whispered doubt and accusation into human ears, to the constant charges leveled against humanity, accusation has been a primary tool of the enemy. By choosing not to respond to the barrage of false charges hurled against him, Jesus effectively broke their power and rendered them meaningless in the divine economy. Had Jesus engaged in a verbal defense, he would have legitimized the false accusations. By remaining silent, he refused to acknowledge the validity of the lies, thereby exposing their emptiness. His quiet dignity stood in stark contrast to the frenzied, baseless accusations of his accusers, highlighting the moral bankruptcy of their claims. This was not evasion. It was a profound act of divine passive resistance against spiritual oppression. The accusations against him were not merely human slander. They were fueled by spiritual forces of darkness, seeking to condemn the Son of God. Yet, in his silence, Jesus disarmed these principalities and powers. He became the ultimate example of how to face false testimony, by trusting in a higher truth that transcends earthly courts and human judgment. His quiet acceptance negated the power of their words to truly condemn him. Later, Christ is described as our advocate in heaven, one who stands before God on our behalf. Having faced every accusation imaginable without sin, without protest, and without yielding, he is uniquely qualified to represent us. His silence before Pilate laid the groundwork for our eternal vindication, showing that he absorbed every false charge, every condemnation, so that we might stand righteous before God. This act of non-response was a powerful demonstration of his sinlessness. He had no need to defend himself, because there was no truth to their accusations. His silence was the perfect answer to every lie, every twisting of truth, every attempt to defame his character. It declared his absolute purity and his unwavering commitment to righteousness, even unto death. The silence that seemed like defeat was, in fact, the beginning of his triumph over all forms of condemnation. It was his quiet rejection of the enemy's lies, a decisive blow against the very foundation of accusation. He allowed himself to be accused, knowing that through his silent suffering, he would free countless others from the chains of guilt and condemnation. The historical analysis of Jesus' silence before Pilate offers profound insights, but its true power lies in its personal application to our own lives. Just as Jesus chose silence in that pivotal moment, God sometimes chooses silence in our lives. This is not a sign of abandonment or indifference, but often a powerful means of speaking to the soul, inviting us into a deeper realm of trust and understanding. In moments of unanswered prayer, or when we face overwhelming challenges and feel that God is quiet, it can be deeply unsettling. We often expect a loud voice, a clear sign, a miraculous intervention. Yet, God's quietness in our lives, much like Jesus' silence before Pilate, can be a deliberate act, a space where faith is tested, refined, and strengthened. It is an invitation to listen differently, to perceive His presence not in the clamor, but in the stillness. This quiet period can be a time for introspection, for discerning God's unseen work, for learning to rely not on immediate answers, but on his unchanging character. It is an opportunity to cultivate a trust that transcends circumstances, to believe in his faithfulness even when his activity is not immediately apparent. The silence can strip away our reliance on superficial reassurances and lead us to a more profound dependence on him. Just as Pilate's confusion was contrasted with heaven's clarity, our own bewilderment in God's silence can lead to a deeper understanding of his sovereign plan. What seems like an absence of response might actually be God's way of working in ways we cannot yet perceive, orchestrating events behind the scenes for our ultimate good and his glory. This is where true faith is forged, in the quiet, often uncomfortable, spaces where we are forced to simply trust. This chapter invites each of us to find faith in those quiet moments, to trust God's unseen work, and to remember that his silence is never empty. It is often filled with purpose, with preparation, and with a profound love that is shaping us for his greater design. When the world clamors for answers, we are called to listen for God's voice in the stillness, to remember the Lamb who is silent, and to know that he is ever working, even when we do not hear his voice aloud. Jesus' silence before Pilate, the image of the unresisting lamb led to the slaughter, was not the end of his story. Far from it. This profound quietude was merely the calm before the resurrection storm, the stillness that preceded an earth-shattering triumph. The silent lamb, seemingly defeated and condemned, was destined to become the roaring lion of Judah, a powerful symbol of his ultimate victory over sin, death, and the grave. The narrative transforms dramatically from the meekness of the lamb to the majesty of the lion. His willingness to submit to suffering and apparent weakness was the very path to his overwhelming power. The silence of the trial gave way to the cries of the cross, and then to the triumphant silence of the tomb before the explosive power of the resurrection. This was not a change in his identity, but a full revelation of it, demonstrating the multifaceted nature of his divine being. This journey from silent submission to roaring triumph paints a vivid picture of Jesus' ultimate authority. He willingly laid down his life, but no one took it from him. He allowed himself to be judged by human courts, but rose in divine power, shattering the chains of death. His silence before Pilate was a testimony to his perfect control, not a sign of his helplessness. He orchestrated his own passion, even in his quietude. His resurrection from the dead confirmed everything his silent trial foreshadowed. The silence spoke of his humility and obedience. The resurrection spoke of his power and sovereignty. These two seemingly opposite aspects are intrinsically linked, demonstrating that his humiliation was the very means to his exaltation. The silent lamb was indeed the mighty God, proving his kingship not by words of defense, but by an act of unparalleled divine power. One day, this same Jesus, the silent lamb who suffered, will return, but his return will not be in silence or meekness. He will come as the roaring lion of Judah, in power and great glory, to judge the living and the dead, and to establish his eternal kingdom fully. The quiet submission to earthly injustice was momentary, but the victory secured by his resurrection and promised in his return is eternal and absolute. His silence was a prelude to a roar that echoes through eternity, announcing his triumph over every foe. It was the quiet, profound act that set the stage for the greatest demonstration of power the world has ever known. The Lamb who was silent is now glorified, seated at the right hand of the Father, and he will reign forever. The story of Jesus' silence before Pilate is far more than a historical account. It is a profound lesson in divine wisdom, sacrifice, and ultimate victory. We have seen how his quiet steadfastness was not a sign of weakness, but a deliberate act of spiritual power, fulfilling ancient prophecies and dismantling the very nature of accusation. His silence was a submission, not to Rome, but to the Father's will, a costly yet graceful path that secured our redemption. It reminds us that true strength often lies not in our words or our defenses, but in our trust and obedience to a higher purpose. Just as Jesus' silence spoke volumes, so too can God's apparent quietness in our lives be a powerful means of shaping us, calling us to a deeper faith that transcends immediate understanding. If this journey through the hidden fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy resonated with you, if it offered new clarity or stirred something within your spirit, we invite you to become a part of our community. Please subscribe to this channel for more faith-filled content that explores the depths of Scripture. Take a moment to like this video, as your support helps others discover these important messages. We would love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below and share what impacted you most, or any questions you are still carrying. And above all, share this video with someone you care about, someone who needs to be reminded of the profound power in Jesus' silent sacrifice.